Hi, my name is Astara. At my 34th birthday, my parents made me wear a glittered paper crown that said, "How to Grow Up." Guests laughed, my sister toasted, and I stood there, smiling, because that's what I was raised to do. But that night, I found out they'd emptied my savings account. And the next morning, my childhood was stuffed into a trash bag and left on the curb. They said it was time I learned to stand on my own. What they didn't know was I already had, so I have to ask, what kind of family throws you away, then begs you to save them? And when they do you? Or do you finally walk away? I hadn't even turned off the engine yet when I noticed it. 3 cars I didn't recognize, all parked at weird angles across the gravel like no one cared who could get out later. My fingers lingered on the key, but the radio had already cut off. The house looked the same as always, but something in the air felt different. I took a deep breath, checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror, and forced a smile. Charlottesville in early spring could be unpredictable. The dogwoods were blooming, the air had that mix of pollen and promise, but I knew better. I'd been through enough birthdays under this roof to know that celebration didn't mean celebrated. As I stepped out and walked up the porch, the front door creaked open before I could knock. It was Aunt Helen. Her lipstick was brighter than usual, and her eyes did that thing, scanning me top to bottom like she didn't mean it. "Well, look who's here," she said, as if I hadn't RSVP'd. "Surprised you made it." "Good to see you too, Aunt Helen." Inside, the smell of catered food was strong. Steak sliders, something cheesy, and too much perfume. Laughter spilled from the living room. I waved at a few cousins, nodded at Vera's church friends, and noticed Callista's people had already set up camp near the wine. Not one person looked surprised to see me. And I drifted into the dining area, scanning the place cards on the tables. Vera's friends. Thorne's colleagues. Callista's crew. My name wasn't on any of them. I looked over at Mom. She was fluffing napkins, lips moving fast with some guest. I stepped closer. "Hey, Mom, I don't see a seat with my name." She glanced at me briefly, her tone too bright. "Oh, sit wherever, darling. You're always so flexible." I stood there for a second, purse still in hand, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Everyone else had a space assigned, but I was expected to float. Just like always, convenient, optional, never quite anchored. I picked a chair at the back near the hallway, tucked in beside the coat rack, and quietly watched Callista bask in her crowd. Dad laughed a little too loud at someone's story. I kept one hand on my glass of water like it might ground me. Then I heard it, the unmistakable ting-ting of Mom's wine glass. "Everyone, can I have your attention for just a moment?" The room hushed. "Today we celebrate our youngest turning 34, she said, gesturing toward me like I was a prize on a game show. "Astara, come up here, sweetie." I hesitated, set my glass down, and walked toward her, trying to read the room. Some people clapped half-heartedly, others just smiled politely. "Let's make this fun," Mom chirped, pulling something from behind her back. A paper crown. It was glittery, handmade. Callista's work, no doubt. But what made my breath catch was the bold, black lettering written across the front. "How to Grow Up." Laughter. A few gasps. Someone even whistled. Before I could say a word, Mom leaned in and plopped it gently on my head. "There," she said, smoothing my hair like I was still 8. "Perfect." I froze. Dad chuckled from his seat. "Well, it's about time, don't you think?" I wanted to tear it off. I wanted to scream, but my hands didn't move. My face didn't twitch. I just stood there, heart pounding, skin hot, teeth clenched behind a practiced smile. I tried to speak but stopped. Instead, I gave a tight nod and turned. As I walked back to my corner chair, I caught a few guests looking away. Embarrassed? Or just tired of pretending this wasn't exactly who they thought I was? Callista raised her glass toward me like a toast. I didn't return it. I sat down, felt the crown dig slightly into my scalp, and wondered how it had come to this. 34 years old, and still being mocked like a child who missed curfew. I whispered to no one. "Excuse me for a minute," I said, and stood up. No one stopped me. I made my way down the hallway, past the powder room and into the guest bathroom. It was still painted seafoam green, still had the same coral print towels I hated as a teenager. I locked the door, turned on the faucet, and stared into the mirror. The crown still sat on my head, tilted slightly, casting a faint shadow across my forehead. Maybe they were right. Maybe I never grew up. Maybe I was still that girl who asked for approval and never got it. Maybe I was always too soft, too different, too invisible. Or maybe they just never let me. I reached up, adjusted the crown gently so it sat perfectly centered. Then I smiled. Slow, deliberate, unrecognizable, even to me. This wasn't humiliation anymore. It was fuel. This is the last time I stand here wearing anything they put on me. It wasn't a dramatic exit. I didn't slam the door or throw the crown down in protest. I simply stepped out, adjusted the paper tiara on my head like it was made of gold, and re-entered the living room with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The fake kind you wear like lipstick, bold enough to distract, shallow enough to wipe off. By the time I returned, Callista was already holding court in the gift-opening circle. She sat in the center like a debutante at her own cotillion, surrounded by neatly stacked boxes, wrapped in expensive paper and embossed ribbon. Her tone was cheerful, confident. The room glowed around her. Mom gestured toward me with that same polished hostess grin. "Astara, come over. We haven't forgotten you." I walked forward slowly, like I was approaching a dentist's chair, every step rehearsed but reluctant. A small square package was handed to me. Vera leaned in slightly, lowering her voice for effect. "Just a little something to guide you, sweetheart. Thought it might help." I took it, careful not to tear the paper too fast. Inside was a book. Bright yellow, mass-market paperback, glossy. The title, 7 Steps to Self-Reliance. I stared at it. Then I noticed the receipt, still tucked inside. Full price? No. It had a red sticker on it. Clearance bin. $4.99. I held it up with both hands like a trophy. "Thanks," I said, tone as even as I could manage. "Looks inspiring." Dad didn't even look up from his phone. The laughter continued around Callista's corner of the room, now opening her second gift, some luxury spa certificate. I watched as she held it up, and everyone clapped, like she'd just published a novel or saved a whale. I returned to my corner of the room quietly. That moment cracked something open. I thought about all the birthdays in this house, years of effort to be presentable, likable, invisible enough not to cause trouble, but visible enough to be acknowledged. Callista got a piano when she turned 13. I remember because the whole living room was cleared out for it. Guests came by just to hear her play one song she barely knew. For her sweet 16, they rented a boat. There were fireworks, a DJ, a slideshow of her baby pictures projected onto the dockside screen. For mine, a planner, color-coded tabs, and a driving lesson with Dad where he spent most of the time on his phone, answering emails. It wasn't that they didn't give me gifts, I remember thinking. They gave me tools, like I was born to repair, not to imagine. "Okay, everyone," Mom's voice rang out again. She tapped her glass with a fork. "We have one last treat, a trip down memory lane." She dimmed the lights. The TV flicked on, and then, like a highlight reel made by someone who'd edited me out, the video began. Callista twirling in a dance recital. Callista graduating with honors. Callista blowing out candles with frosting on her nose over and over again. A polished, gleaming version of our family's past. I appeared once, blurry, in the background, in a striped shirt I never liked, not centered, not named. If you blinked, you'd miss me. Someone near me whispered, "Wasn't this supposed to be for both daughters?" Mom laughed. "Oh, honey, Astara never liked the camera." That wasn't true. I had loved being in photos, until I noticed I was never given the prints, until I realized my face didn't make it onto the walls. I stood up and quietly walked to the kitchen. No one followed. I stood at the sink and turned on the cold water. I didn't need to wash my hands, but it gave me something to do. Something that didn't require me to smile, nod, or pretend that being erased in slow motion was okay. The faucet dripped rhythmically. Outside the window, dusk had settled over the backyard. The wind pushed a hanging swing gently. I used to sit on that swing for hours, pretending I was somewhere else. I let the memory in without warning. My 12th birthday. They all forgot. Mom claimed she was busy with budget deadlines. Dad was in Atlanta for a conference. Callista had cheer practice and couldn't skip just for cake. It was my grandmother who saved me that night. She showed up with a store-bought cupcake, a plastic candle, and a quiet smile. We sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. She didn't say much, just lit the candle and whispered, "I see you." That moment meant more to me than any party. Now, in this same kitchen years later, I dried my hands and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. They called it growing up. They said I needed direction, but the truth was, they just never wanted me to go anywhere they couldn't control. I exhaled slowly, not defeated, not crushed, tired of being edited out of my own life. I didn't linger in the kitchen, just enough time to let my breath settle, to tell myself I wasn't going to cry. Not tonight, not again. I dried my hands, took one last glance at the flickering lights beyond the window, and stepped back into the hallway. The noise had shifted slightly. Less laughter, more the kind of talk that floats around people who've had too many appetizers and just enough wine to feel important. The smell of coffee had started creeping through the house. Someone must have turned on the pot in the dining room. I followed the trail, pausing when I passed the hallway mirror. My reflection looked put together, almost like a guest. Neat blouse, pressed slacks, subtle jewelry. There was nothing out of place, except me. I walked into the living room just as Aunt Becca was opening a small box from Vera. A set of gold-rimmed coasters, probably a re-gift. She was beaming anyway. Then it happened. A woman I vaguely recognized, someone from Dad's office maybe, approached me with a half-empty tumbler. She held it out like I was waiting for it. "Could I get some more ginger ale? I think the fridge in the garage has some." I stared at the glass in her hand. For a moment, I thought maybe she was joking, but her expression was blank, expectant. "I'm sorry, are you talking to me?" I asked. She blinked. "Oh, aren't you one of the servers?" "No, I'm the birthday girl." Her face flushed instantly. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. You looked so efficient." Before I could respond, Vera cut in smoothly from across the room, laughing like she'd rehearsed it. "That's our Astara, always moving, always pitching in. She never liked sitting still, even as a kid." The woman smiled awkwardly and backed away. I still hadn't moved. My hands were curled into fists at my sides. Efficient, server, background character. I sat down on the edge of a chair near the fireplace, not bothering to check if it had a name card. A few people looked over, but no one said anything. Dad was on his second glass of red. Callista, naturally, had her own orbit, with half a dozen people angled toward her like plants toward sunlight. Then came the card ceremony. Mom clapped her hands lightly. "Let's pass the birthday cards now. Astara, sweetie, open yours first." I didn't want to. I already knew it wouldn't matter. But I nodded, reached for the slim envelope with my name written in Vera's flowy cursive. I opened it. Inside was a pastel card with glittery tulips. Generic. I flipped it open and stared. "To our dear Callista, happy birthday. We love you." There it was, black ink. No corrections, no second thoughts. I didn't speak. I just held it open for an extra second, long enough to let the silence settle like dust. "Oh my goodness," Vera gasped. "I must have grabbed the wrong one. That was meant for your sister. Let me—" "No need," I said, folding it slowly. "It happens." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dad shift in his seat. He wasn't surprised. If anything, he looked annoyed, like the card had exposed something they preferred to keep unspoken. I placed the envelope on the side table, next to a vase of flowers Callista had apparently picked out for herself. Tulips, again. The room moved on. More cards were passed. More polite chuckles. My name was mentioned once or twice in passing, always in the context of doing her own thing, or keeping busy with numbers. Eventually, I slipped outside. The patio was quiet, a string of lights still blinking along the wooden railing from some previous celebration. It was cooler now, the kind of chill that seeps through silk and settles on your skin like judgment. I sat on the steps, pulling my legs up slightly, arms resting over my knees. I could leave right now, I thought. Walk down the driveway, call a ride, vanish into the night. Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? And if they did, would it be because I was gone, or because I left without permission? I thought about when I was 9 and ran away for 6 hours. Took a peanut butter sandwich, a flashlight, and a blanket. Hid under the neighbor's deck. They didn't notice until dinner. When I came back, Vera asked if I was done playing games. No one hugged me. No one asked why I left. They were just upset that they had to microwave my plate. That kind of absence sticks with you. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. The kind of silence that builds a wall between you and everyone else, brick by brick. I watched the lights through the glass door. Callista was laughing again. Dad raised his glass. Mom fluffed her sweater. And me? I was out here, unbothered, unwanted, unseen. The thing is, I didn't want a seat at their table anymore. I wanted my own table. One where I didn't have to explain myself, shrink myself, apologize for existing too quietly or thinking too loudly. The anger didn't rise this time. It didn't burn. It settled, solid, grounded. They had mistaken me for a server. They had handed me a card with the wrong name. They forgot me before I had the chance to forget them. And it wasn't personal. Not to them, anyway. But it had shaped every corner of my life. I stood up slowly, letting the cold air settle over me like armor. I wasn't done yet, but I was done pretending. If they could misplace me in a card, what else had they erased? From outside, the house still glowed like a picture-perfect family postcard. Golden light spilling through the windows, laughter and clinking glasses faint behind the walls. But as I walked back in through the side door, I felt none of it. Just the weight in my chest, pressing in, slow and steady. Most of the guests had trickled out. The volume had lowered. The air turned heavier with wine and fatigue. Callista was lounging on the couch, feet curled up, sipping champagne as if it were any other Saturday night. Dad stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of red, deep in a quiet conversation with one of his golf buddies. Mom had her usual hosting smile, even with her shoes off now, gesturing toward leftovers, as if feeding people validated her motherhood. I made my way toward the kitchen to grab a glass of water, something cold, clean. I needed it more than I thought. As I stepped back into the living room, I saw Dad wave me over. He was holding a manila folder, thick with paper. "Hey," he said, casual but with that tone. The tone that always preceded a favor disguised as a decision already made. "Just a quick thing before you head out. Some paperwork." I blinked. "Paperwork?" "Nothing serious," he assured me, handing over the folder. "It's about the cabin property upstate. Just some temporary custodial stuff. With everything getting shuffled, it's easier if the documents are under one name for now." "Yours?" I asked. He smiled without answering. Mom chimed in behind me. "It's just a custodial reassignment, honey. You'll still be listed. Don't overthink it." My fingers ran over the edges of the folder. It wasn't sealed. I opened it and flipped through the first few pages. It was legal language, dense, passive voice, intentionally vague. But I'd handled enough contract work to spot a transfer when I saw one. The ownership wasn't being held temporarily. It was being restructured. Out of my name. "Why now?" I asked slowly. "Why tonight?" Dad exhaled like I'd asked the wrong question. "Astara, it's not a big deal. We're just trying to keep things streamlined." "Because I'm so disorganized?" I replied, softer than I intended. Mom laid a hand on my arm. "We just want what's best for everyone. Callista already has management experience, and she lives closer to the cabin. It's logical." "Logical," I repeated. I could feel my pulse in my neck. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out instinctively. "Bank alert. $3,200 withdrawal. Row Celebration Group Catering." I stared at the screen. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. Then I opened the app. It was from my checking account, the one I used for personal savings. Not the joint one we'd long since closed. The one only I had access to, only me, or so I thought. I turned toward Mom, the folder still open in my hands. Did you use my account to pay for this party? She blinked, surprised I'd ask in front of Dad. We needed to book things quickly, she said, lowering her voice. And you weren't returning texts. I figured it wouldn't be a problem. We'll pay you back. That's not the point, I said. Dad stepped forward. Astara, come on. You're part of this family. We all give. I was never invited to give, I said, voice trembling now. Only expected to. That stopped them for a second, but not for long. You're making a scene, Dad muttered. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Afraid of what? I asked, my voice steadying. That I'd notice? He looked down at his glass. You're too emotional to handle this kind of responsibility long term. It's nothing personal. Mom nodded. It's just, you don't think things through? You internalize everything and then blow up. That's why we've always tried to help guide you. By excluding me? I asked. We're not excluding you, she said. We're just prioritizing what's practical. Is that what you call it? I smiled. Practical? The word hung between us. Silence, again, the kind I'd grown up with. The kind that meant we're done here. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I see, I said. I handed the folder back. Don't worry. I won't sign anything tonight. Dad shrugged. Suit yourself. But don't delay this too long. The paperwork is time-sensitive. I walked out without another word, heading to the staircase. In my old bedroom, everything still looked like a snapshot from a past I didn't ask to keep. Faded posters, a dresser that still creaked, an old corkboard with tacks but no photos. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop, typed into the search bar, how to remove your name from family assets legally. Then paused, deleted the phrase. Typed again. Independent estate representation lawyer near me. Click. I bookmarked the top result. They taught me the cost of independence. I was ready to pay it. The upstairs hallway still smelled like lavender linen spray and furniture polish. Familiar, controlled, and suffocating all at once. I walked toward my old bedroom, moving automatically. No emotion, no thought, just the muscle memory of years spent doing what I was told. I was looking for my coat, maybe a moment of silence. What I found instead was two women I didn't recognize standing in the middle of my room in their underwear. One of them jumped, clutching her blouse to her chest. Oh, sorry, we didn't think anyone was coming up. The other, halfway through zipping up a cocktail dress, gave a sheepish grin. Your mom said we could use this room to change. Hope that's okay. It wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Because what else do you do when your childhood bedroom has become a dressing room for your sister's friends? My bed, which once held diary entries and late-night homework sessions, was now covered in handbags and coats. The framed photo of Grandma and me had been shoved behind a shoebox. My jewelry box, the one with the little dancer, was cracked open. Empty. I didn't speak, just turned around and closed the door behind me, slowly and quietly. My hands shook, but my steps didn't. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter filled the space again. It was almost midnight, and the party was winding down, at least for those who weren't still basking in the glow of Callista's curated charm. In the living room, Vera raised her glass for what I assumed was the final toast. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed. To family, she began, and to all of us continuing to grow, evolve, and support one another in finding our paths. She turned toward me with a glint of performance in her eyes. Especially our youngest, Astara. May she discover the direction that best suits her. Some guests smiled politely. Thorne nodded, lifting his glass half an inch. Callista sat back like a queen whose crown couldn't be touched. That was it. I walked to the center of the room without planning to. My heels sounded louder on the wood floor than they probably were, but maybe that was just my pulse in my ears. The microphone was still resting on the speaker stand. I picked it up. My voice came out clear, calm, not shaky, not small. Thank you, I began, for showing me what growing up looks like. A few people chuckled, unsure where this was going. It looks like having your name misspelled, your bank account used without asking, your childhood bed turned into a storage space. It looks like being remembered last and blamed first. Now, silence. It means learning to give without ever being asked if you wanted to. It means having your worth measured by how well you stay quiet. Vera's smile was frozen now. Thorne shifted in his seat, crossing one leg over the other like that would somehow shield him. I've spent years thinking something was wrong with me, that I wasn't ready or focused enough or bold enough to be part of this machine, but I finally realized the machine was never built for me. I glanced around the room, pausing for the weight of it to settle. I'm not angry anymore, I added. I'm just awake. And with that, I placed the mic back on the stand and walked toward the front door. No one stopped me. I grabbed my coat from the hook and stepped out onto the porch. The air had cooled since earlier. The sky above was full of stars, quiet, watching. Behind me, the party noises resumed after a minute, though more tentative now, like someone had turned down the volume on the family show. I was halfway down the driveway when I heard footsteps. "Wait up!" Callista called out. I turned around slowly. She was barefoot, holding her shoes in one hand, wine glass in the other. "You didn't have to do that in front of everyone," she said, not angry, just annoyed. "I did," I replied. "Mom's gonna spin it. You know that, right? She'll make it sound like you're going through one of your episodes again." I nodded. "Let her. She's been narrating my life for decades. I just took the mic back for 5 minutes. Callista sighed. "You know, it's hard for her. She doesn't always know how to love you the way you want." I looked her in the eye. "It's not about how she loves. It's about how she controls." Callista didn't argue, just shrugged. "Well, you did what you had to, I guess." I unlocked my car, opened the driver door. She lingered. "You leaving town again?" "Not this time," I said, "but I am leaving them." She didn't respond right away. Then, softly, "It's easier said than done." I got in the car and closed the door gently. She stayed at the edge of the driveway for a moment, then turned and walked back. As I drove toward the main road, my phone buzzed. A text. "Grandma, you did good, baby. I saw everything." I pulled over to the side of the road, tears stinging my eyes, but not from sadness, from something else, something quieter, like being believed. I typed back, "Thank you." Then I sat for a long moment with the engine running, watching the headlights carve out a path ahead. That was the last time I left their house as their daughter. The sun hadn't fully risen when I pulled into the driveway. The grass glistened faintly with dew, untouched, like nothing had happened the night before. From the outside, the house looked peaceful, unchanged, like a family home should. But I knew better. I'd learned by now that appearances were just another trick they'd mastered. I didn't text or call. I didn't want a conversation. I just wanted to collect the last of my things, quietly, and leave. When I knocked on the door, Vera opened it without a word. Her robe was cinched tight, makeup half done. She folded her arms and stood in the doorway like a gatekeeper. "You've said enough," she murmured. "Get what you need and go." I didn't answer, just nodded and stepped past her into the hallway, my heels silent on the carpet. Every step forward felt like walking through quicksand, familiar but heavy. I climbed the stairs slowly, as if giving myself time to breathe before facing whatever version of closure they'd decided I deserved. When I opened the door to my old room, I froze. It was empty. Not stripped bare, but gutted. The closet door hung open, hangers rattling against each other like bones. My boxes were missing. The corkboard I'd left above the desk was gone. Only the nails remained, embedded in the wall like they'd been driven there to hold more than just photos. I walked in cautiously, scanning the space like it might still hold pieces of me I hadn't realized I was leaving behind. The dresser drawers were open, half empty. My grandmother's recipe tin, gone. The pair of journals I kept stacked under the bed, not even a trace of them. I turned and walked back downstairs, fists clenched, blood pounding. Mom was in the kitchen, pouring herself a second cup of coffee. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Where are my things?" I asked, calm, measured. She didn't flinch. "We assumed you wouldn't be back after last night. Callista helped me clear the room this morning." I walked past her, out the front door. That's when I saw it. A large black trash bag, half hidden behind the recycling bin, slumped at the curb like a corpse no one wanted to claim. I opened it. Inside, my photo albums, pages torn slightly at the binding, my favorite sweater from college, still faintly carrying the scent of jasmine detergent. A notebook filled with my grandmother's handwriting, her cursive so delicate it always felt like it could vanish if handled too harshly. Everything that had held weight in my life was now garbage. I walked back into the house, fury boiling beneath my skin but held together by sheer restraint. "You threw my life away like it meant nothing," I said. Vera finally turned to face me, eyes narrowed. "No," she replied. "We threw away the things you refused to let go of. You want to grow up? Then stop clinging to the past. Stop acting like trash." For a second, I didn't say a word. I just stared at her. Then Thorne appeared in the hallway, dressed in his usual weekend uniform, pressed slacks, and quiet disapproval. "You want independence?" he said, his voice low but cold. "Here. Take all of it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The intent was razor sharp. They didn't want me out of the house. They wanted me erased from the family. I stepped back toward the door. "Don't worry," I said, almost softly. "I'll take it all, including every reason to never come back." And then, without looking back, I closed the door behind me. The drive back to Arlington was a blur. The trash bag sat in the trunk like a silent passenger, heavier than it looked. At one point, I pulled over just outside of town, rolled down the window, and let the wind hit my face. I wasn't crying. I thought I might. I thought the finality of it all would break something open. But it didn't. Instead, I felt stripped, empty in a way that wasn't sad, but strangely clean. When I got home, I didn't bring the bag inside. I left it in the trunk and walked straight to my apartment, dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, booted up my laptop. I didn't even take off my coat. I opened a new tab and typed, "Estate Legal Representation, Independent Family Dispute Resolution, Arlington, VA." Links popped up. I clicked on the first one, then another. I wasn't rushing. I was steady, surgical, because when someone tells you to disappear, and you do, but with purpose, that's not surrender. That's strategy. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Callista. I watched it buzz until it went silent. She didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't expect her to. I sat down at the kitchen table, back straight, breathing even. My hands trembled only slightly as I began filling out the online intake form. Name: Astara Vey. Email: Primary concern: family financial manipulation, estate exclusion. I paused, then added a line at the bottom. Additional context: estrangement initiated by parent action, seeking full separation. I hit send. A confirmation popped up, and then I stared at the screen, quiet. One tear rolled down my cheek. Just one. Then I wiped it away, stood up, and made tea. No second tear came. They wanted me out of the family. I'd give them exactly what they asked for. A year passed faster than I expected, but it didn't pass quietly. In the early mornings, I built spreadsheets from scratch. At night, I drafted proposals for clients who'd been denied funding more times than I could count. I poured myself into work, not to forget the past, but to carve something real from the space it left behind. By spring, I had clients up and down the East Coast, mostly women running small businesses, nonprofits, or breaking away from family-controlled trusts. I rented a small office downtown in Arlington, nothing fancy, just clean lines, bright walls, and a second-hand desk I refinished myself. A corner shelf held the framed note from Grandma I'd found in that garbage bag. Being invisible isn't the same as being powerless. Some mornings I'd stare at it with coffee in hand, feeling every word settle into my skin like armor. I never wore the crown again, of course, but I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a drawer at the back of my filing cabinet. Not out of nostalgia, out of clarity, like a scar you no longer hide. The day everything shifted again was a Tuesday. I remember because it had been an unusually quiet one. I was reviewing a financial model for a startup in Alexandria when my phone buzzed. Callista. I stared at the screen for a second, debating whether to answer. It had been nearly 9 months since I'd blocked her number, then unblocked it, then blocked it again. But this time, curiosity won. I picked up. "Hey," her voice came through, tight. "I know this is awkward, but we need to talk." I stayed silent. She rushed forward. "It's Dad's company. It's gone under. We didn't plan right. There were some bad investments, and the restructuring didn't go the way it should have. They're at risk of losing the house." I closed my laptop gently, voice flat. "What does that have to do with me?" "They need help. They need you, Astara. You know how to fix this stuff. You've worked with family trusts. You've seen situations worse than this." I leaned back in my chair. "And now I'm convenient. They're scared. Mom won't say it, but she's crying all the time. And Dad, he won't even admit it's over. You're the only one who knows how to help." I looked out the window at the small green tree I'd planted last fall. It was still bare, but growing. "They made their choices," I said calmly, "and I made mine. We're still family." "No," I said, sharper now. "That ended when my journals were in a trash bag and you watched it happen." She went quiet. I could hear her swallow, then a long sigh. "I'm not asking you to forgive them," she said, "but I thought you'd at least care enough to stop them from losing everything." I almost laughed. "Everything? They lost me, and you didn't blink." The call ended shortly after. I expected that to be the end of it. Quiet, awkward, done. But they weren't finished with me. Not by a long shot. The first sign came 3 days later when a former family friend, one of those distant country club types, posted a thinly veiled Facebook status. Funny how some people forget where they come from once they get a little success. No names, but my name didn't need to be said. Then came the letter. Vera posted it to her church newsletter and on her neighborhood association board. "It is with heavy hearts that we share how our daughter, who was raised with values and faith, has chosen not to support us during our time of difficulty. We continue to love her and pray she remembers the importance of family." I read it while eating lunch at my desk. I didn't react. Not at first. I just stared at the screen, spoon paused halfway to my mouth. The same tone, the same false compassion, making herself the victim once again. But what came next hit deeper. A local radio station, one Dad used to guest on as a financial advisor, aired a segment titled, "When Inheritance Goes Sideways." The host interviewed Thorne. He didn't mention me directly, but the implication was there. Some children just don't understand legacy. They think independence means turning their backs, but families are systems. If you break one part, the whole thing suffers. My inbox flooded the next morning. Clients asking, "Is this about you?" Friends messaging, "Should we say something?" Former colleagues tiptoeing around the topic. And yet, I wasn't rattled. Because the one thing they forgot was that I kept receipts, literal and metaphorical. I still had the video of the crown, the texts, the audio recording of Vera telling me I acted like trash, the withdrawal notice from my account, the legal documents I'd refused to sign. I kept it all. Not for revenge, for clarity. Because when people try to rewrite history, you better be ready to publish the truth. I opened my file folder labeled Row Estate, Closed. I smiled, not out of spite, out of relief. They wanted to win sympathy, but I knew the game better now. And if they wanted the public's sympathy, they should have hidden the receipts better. I didn't plan it for drama. That wasn't the point. It wasn't some act of revenge or grand theatrical unveiling. If anything, I wasn't sure I'd send the clip at all. I hovered over the Attach File button for a long time, so long the screen dimmed once, then twice, like even my laptop was unsure. But something inside me clicked, a deep, wordless certainty that it was time. The file was small, barely 90 seconds long, but it held 10 years of silence, packed tight like a coil. It started with Vera placing the paper crown on my head, her hands lingering a little too long. The words, "How to Grow Up," were written in glittery gold along the front, ridiculous, juvenile, cruel, in a way that passed as charming if you didn't look too closely. The camera panned over the guests, polite applause, tight smiles. People sipping wine and pretending not to notice the tension simmering just below the tablecloth. The birthday card with Callista's name signed in big swoops. And then my voice, calm, steady, a bit too controlled, as I was told to leave, told I was ungrateful, told I was the problem, told I could find a better way to celebrate elsewhere. Then, me walking out, and finally the front door closing behind me. I didn't know the footage existed until months later. A neighbor had recorded it on their phone, just a sliver of the party, but enough. Enough to show the world what family values looked like behind polished glass. The video came to me in a message from their niece, a young woman I had helped through a scholarship grant I'd organized years ago. She had sent it quietly, carefully. "This isn't right," she wrote. "I thought you should have this." That night, I sat in my apartment, lights dimmed, watching the clip on repeat. It wasn't just what happened, it was how routine it looked, how normal it must have seemed to those in the room, how no one had stepped in. I wrote a short email to a journalist I'd once helped pro bono, back when no one knew my name. She was freelancing now, focused mostly on stories about power and perception, how image often masks reality. Her inbox was probably a graveyard of unread tips, but I figured if she saw the subject line, she'd look twice. Subject: Here's what family values look like behind closed doors. Body: You once said the truth matters more when it's inconvenient. I attached the file. Then I hit send. The video went public 2 days later. It didn't just circulate, it detonated. Within 36 hours, it was everywhere. By day 3, talk shows were dissecting it frame by frame. Local news stations ran commentary segments with titles like The Crown, The Card, and The Collapse. On social media, hashtags bloomed like wildfire. #Crown of Shame, #Astarave, #Family Facade. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a take. Therapists posted stitched responses discussing covert abuse and emotional scapegoating in high-pressure families. Influencers cried on camera, calling it the most chilling birthday clip they'd seen in years. Former classmates, some I hadn't heard from in over a decade, flooded my inbox. Some just sent a single heart emoji. Others wrote long, earnest paragraphs. I had no idea. Or, "This makes so much sense now." I didn't respond. I watched as Thorne's consulting firm quietly lost 3 contracts within the week. Watched as Callista's name was quietly removed from the board of a prominent nonprofit that had once splashed her face across their Women in Leadership campaign. And Vera was caught on camera outside a grocery store, crying, mascara smudged, lips trembling in a way that might have seemed sympathetic if you didn't know the full story. "I never meant to hurt her," she said to the local reporter who ambushed her near the parking lot. "I did what I thought was best. But Astara, she's rewriting everything. She's making us out to be monsters." The woman filming asked, "Did you really make her wear that crown?" Vera didn't answer. The video cut off in silence. I didn't feel satisfaction, not in the gloating sense. There's a line between vengeance and vindication. One comes with heat, with fury, with the impulse to burn it all down. The other comes like a breeze through a window you hadn't realized was locked. Cool, clear, unapologetically clean. One is fire, the other is air. That evening, I sat at my desk, the sun bleeding gold across the hardwood floor. My office was quiet except for the soft whir of the fan. I opened my email and saw a voicemail transcription waiting. Thorne again. "You've destroyed us. Are you proud?" I didn't listen to the audio. I didn't need to. I deleted it and opened a new draft, sent it straight to my lawyer. Subject: Termination of remaining trust connections. Body: Please proceed with full separation from all family financial ties. I want nothing left to bind us. I clicked send, and then I just sat, not crying, not angry, just still, just free. I opened a new document, titled it, "When Growing Up Means Walking Away." I didn't write it for revenge. I didn't write it to go viral. I wrote it because someone else, somewhere, needed to hear it. Someone stuck in the middle of a smile and nod performance they didn't sign up for. Someone silenced for too long. I typed the opening line, one that had been living in the back of my throat for months. They taught me how to obey, how to stay small, how to be grateful for crumbs dressed up as casseroles, but they never taught me what it meant to grow. And then the words came, not like an avalanche, not like a dam breaking, but like a faucet finally freed of its block. I wrote about being told I was too sensitive, about the way I was ignored when I succeeded but paraded when I stumbled, about how silence was called maturity and boundaries were labeled betrayal. I wrote about the birthday party, yes, but more than that, I wrote about the 1,000 small humiliations that made the crown inevitable. When I was done, I hit save. Not publish. Not yet. I closed the laptop and turned to the window. The Arlington skyline was starting to glow as night settled in. Lights flickered on in the buildings nearby. Somewhere, laughter drifted up from a rooftop patio. The hum of life continued beyond my walls. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert. Daughter's video exposes quiet abuse behind polished suburbia. I didn't click. I didn't need to. They had lost their version of me. I had finally found mine. The truth didn't just set me free. It unraveled me. Slowly, carefully, like a series of quiet knots loosening one by one. I could almost hear the snaps as they gave way, though no one else would have noticed. 2 months had passed since the video had gone viral. The internet, with its insatiable appetite, had long since turned to its next outrage, its next scandal, its next distraction. But for me, the aftermath lingered. Not in the way I had once imagined. There were no celebrations, no grand gestures of vindication, no balloons or banners declaring that I had survived. What came instead was subtler, steadier. A consistent unfolding of peace, like a slow sunrise that you only notice once the world is bathed in light. I found it not in sweeping triumphs, but in the mundane, the ordinary rhythms that no longer carried the weight of fear. Peace came in the mornings I spent prepping slides for a financial literacy seminar, or in the way the kettle whistled when I boiled water for tea. It arrived in the afternoons I spent organizing workshop folders for women who looked far too much like I once did, hopeful, but braced for disappointment. I had begun volunteering at the local community center. Nothing glamorous, nothing flashy, just teaching, listening, guiding. Most of the women I worked with were trying to escape financially manipulative relationships, the kinds of cages that didn't come with bruises, but left you bleeding in places no one else could see. One Saturday morning, I stood at the front of a classroom. The room smelled faintly of dust and instant coffee, folding chairs lined up in uneven rows. Women filled the seats, some younger than me, some older, but all carrying the same quiet wariness in their eyes. It was the look of someone who had been asked to trust one too many times and had learned that hope had teeth. A hand went up from the back. A girl, she couldn't have been older than 20, asked in a voice so soft it was almost an apology, "Are you the woman from that video?" The air stilled for a moment. I could feel all their eyes on me, waiting. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." Another woman sitting near the aisle leaned forward. Her voice was steadier, though it carried its own weight. "What was it like, when it all came out?" I thought for a moment before answering, and when I spoke, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you put on to prove you're fine, but a small, real one. "Loud," I said. Then quiet, then clearer than anything I'd ever heard. A few of them chuckled softly. Others just exhaled, the sound carrying the relief of knowing they weren't alone. I looked around the room, taking in their faces, the guarded way they sat in their chairs. "You don't grow up the moment someone tells you to," I said slowly. "You grow up the moment you finally decide who you refuse to be." The line earned a gentle ripple of applause. I didn't shrink from it, the way I once would have. I let the sound land, let myself take up space without apology. When the session ended, I packed up my things slowly. A few women lingered. Some asked questions about credit scores, about budgeting, about legal protections. Others shared fragments of their own stories, carefully, but bravely. One of them hugged me before she left. It wasn't tight, wasn't desperate. It was reverent. The kind of embrace you give someone who made you feel seen. By the time I arrived home that afternoon, the sunlight was already slanting low through the windows. I set my bag down, made a cup of peppermint tea, and wandered to the shelf in my office nook. A cedar box sat tucked on the bottom row, hidden behind a stack of old tax files. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. The lid creaked open, releasing a faint scent of aged wood and something softer, lavender, or maybe just the memory of it. Inside was a small photograph. Me and Grandma, when I was 7. We were sitting on the porch steps. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder. Both of us were looking off camera, our faces calm, almost luminous. I don't remember what we were watching, but we looked rooted, like we belonged to ourselves. Beneath the photo lay a folded note in her handwriting. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words still carried their weight. To Astara, who always knew when to walk away. I traced the letters with my finger. Underneath it, tucked neatly, was her blueberry pie recipe, written in fading blue ink on an index card. A grease stain marked the corner, a testament to the many times she'd pulled it out in her kitchen. I'd memorized the recipe years ago, but I still kept the card like an heirloom. I propped the note up against the pen holder on my desk, not as a trophy, not as evidence, but as an anchor. The person I had become wasn't angry anymore. She was grounded. She understood that closure wasn't always an apology. Sometimes, closure was just the quiet decision to stop waiting for one, like the unopened letter from Vera. It had arrived only a few days earlier, no return address, but unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a 3-page update. Callista was doing better. Thorne had given up drinking for Lent. The garden was in bloom. There was no apology, no ownership, just updates. I didn't burn it. I didn't tear it up. I folded it back into its envelope and slipped it into the same drawer where I kept old utility bills. That was all it deserved. I didn't need closure from people who still lied to themselves. That night, I met Marisol for dinner at a small cafe by the river. We sat beneath string lights, laughing until our cheeks hurt. We ordered 2 desserts just because, and walked along the water afterward, our voices carrying into the evening. I didn't check my phone once. The weight that had lived in my chest for so long, tight, coiled, unrelenting, had unspooled into something softer. Not gone, not erased, but livable. Back home, before bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No makeup, no mask, just me. A woman older than she had once been, stronger than anyone had expected, softer in the ways that mattered most. The crown they tried to hand me, the one carved from other people's expectations, I had left it behind, and I had grown into something they never thought possible. Free. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't leaving a toxic family. It's unlearning the version of yourself they trained you to believe in. Astara's story reminds us, love without respect is not love at all. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to protect you? Tell us in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe. There's more truth where this came from.